All right. We want to welcome you to another Let's Talk program. I know it's been a little while since we have had a program. There were a number of things going on, a hurricane hitting Florida, and then we had our camp meeting. But we are going to get started with the word of prayer. And if we can, let us pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, now as we begin, we ask that you guide the conversation. Let us be blessed by this encounter we will have with you and the discussion we will have. This we pray, in Jesus' name, amen. All right, so a lot of things going on in the news. There's some things that we did not get to talk about, but you know, we would love to talk about ministry issues. We would love to talk about different things, but it just seems like there is so many racial issues in our country that's going on. And of course, the Aurora Police Department in Colorado, a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, Elijah McClain, he died from a chokehold, and he died from police brutality. And then once again, now, earlier this week, I believe it was August 4th, there was another incident with the police. Basically, the police pulled over a Black family, a woman with children between the ages of 6 to 17, had them face down on the concrete, arms behind their back, some of them handcuffed, and claiming that their car that they own was not their car. And it just doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense. We look at the NBA, we see the Black Lives Matter all on the floor. We see all of these commercials and all these individuals speaking about police brutality. But I want to ask the question to Elder Tracy. What is your thoughts on what happened in Colorado this past week?
I think it's just a ultimate display of disregard, continual desire to dramatically impact the next generation so that they have no trust and they have no relationship they can rely on with those who are supposed to be protecting and serving. It's extremely disheartening that if you suspect the vehicle is stolen, that you don't run the plates. After you run the plate and the name comes back from your individual dispatch, then you know who the vehicle belongs to. They don't go up to the vehicle and ask the individual to please show me your license and registration. And once that individual does that, the names match with the same name you had at your dispatch, why it's not just over? Why automatically is it, let me put a 6-year-old in handcuffs on the floor? And I can almost guarantee you that the normal knee-jerk reaction to your child being handcuffed is for a mother bear to just lose it. Like, just, what are you doing? It's my child, and going out and reaching over. And then what happens? She's shot. And the problem I'm having with what's happening over and over again is we continually see these situations arise, and you have to go above and beyond not to be human in order to survive, and in order for your story to be told as though it's a tragedy. A normal reaction to this is, what are you doing to my children? Leave my children alone. This is my car. What are you talking about? What's the reason for pulling me over? Why am I being arrested? Why am I being detained? Why are my children being detained? My child is 6. And just walking them through that. But if you do any of that, you're resisting arrest without violence, you're obstructing justice, and next thing you know, you're dead and you become a mural. And it just blows my mind that in light of everything that's going on, there are people who simply say they don't have any issues whatsoever with over-policing, aggressive type of policing. And these situations come up over and over again. And I'll say this, and I'm going to just hand it off to my colleagues here. It's so sad to me that John Lewis died at a time like this, because it almost feels as though all the work he put in, and I'm not trying to take any years away from his life, but let's just imagine, had he passed away at the election of Barack Obama, he would have thought at least his generation was able to get over a hump and get us somewhere, and almost kind of just go into the grave saying, you know what, did it work? But he has to end up penning a letter about what's going on in our current day, after all that he's been through, after joining with the Greensboro Four, after marching, after all the beatings and all the things he's undertaken in trying to push for equal, just civility. And all of a sudden now he's back with an administration that is actually telling people, let's get back to how it used to be. Let's put them in cages. Let's go ahead and treat them inhumanely. And for a man to die like that, and it's not just John Lewis, but it's a whole generation of those who have gone on before us who are witnessing a work undone by this administration, by others in control and in power. And it's a very sad thing. My heart goes out to this mother. My heart goes out to her children. They will be forever traumatized. And I'll just simply end by saying this: the hate you give to little infants, it comes back and it messes everybody up. And that's a sanitized version of thug life.
Pastor Sy, what's your stance on what happened in Colorado?
Sorry about that. In Colorado, seeing that this past week, my heart broke a little bit. And I'll just pick up from where Elder Tracy left off at, about, just trauma. As a Black community, we are experiencing trauma from every way, whether it's racial trauma, whether it's transgenerational trauma, secondary trauma. And trauma has an ugly way of just showing its face, throughout our lifetime, and especially things in our life that trigger it to come. So, when we see that this family was pulled over, and this was an egregious offense that the police officers did to this innocent family, we can see that, this could be crippling if the family does not take proactive measures to ensure that they safeguard, what has happened through therapy and getting some local and supports, to help their mental health. Trauma is it's something that is very complex, just because, it can be triggered at any moment. And we just hope that, as this family continues to pick up the pieces from where they have left off, that it won't cause, effects down the line. Case in point, this past week, and it's not deviating from the topic, but it was another news article that speaks to trauma. There was a young lady a while back, and she was a YouTube star, I forget her name, but there was she went to a party and she was raped. And at that party, we don't know what happened in detail, but they ended up making a Netflix series out of the situation between her and her sister. Fast forward to this year, this young lady, she died by suicide. And, she spoke a lot of times about the traumas that transpired from that one encounter. And what broke my heart even more was the mother saying that she wished it were her who was in her daughter's place, and that her daughter didn't have to suffer from the hands of what happened to her. So, I'm not saying that is the path that these young people are onto, but, if it's not addressed and they don't feel supported, trauma does show up and manifests its ways and behaviors and actions in school. And, maybe I'm not able to get back into society and get a job, so on and so forth. So my heart is just that I hope that they, are their therapists that are reaching out to this family so that they can help them cope with what's going on.
Right. Elder Farrington, what's your take?
I'm waiting for a headline to appear or breaking news to come across my screen on Amber Alert or something, that white family handcuffed, held on ground, for a suspected stolen vehicle. I'm waiting for some of that to happen to balance out the equation here. It is that so often that we are desensitized to the fact that this is happening again, like this is just another case. And it's like, at some point you would think that an officer, and this was several of them, would have exercised some caution, exercised some sense and sensibilities, exercised common sense to not to go to the extreme in addressing that situation. So often we are approached from a fear factor point of view, a position that all extreme caution or all thing has to be eliminated, any individual as a threat. So we got 6 children or 6 individuals ranging from from whatever age spectrum, even down to 2 years old, must be considered a person that, if not left in restraints, could cause harm in a situation. It's like crazy, right? So the thing was that really precipitated this event was that they ran the license plate and it came back for a stolen vehicle, but it was a motorcycle license plate that we're talking about here. And if you look at a motorcycle and the size of a license plate on a motorcycle, it's not the size of a license plate on a vehicle. It's just not. And to understand that this could not have been the same, even though there is a mix-up in the system that allows for 2 license plates to be shared, that this could not be the same vehicle in question. But since they went to the extreme of stopping the vehicle and approaching, because this is what I read they're trained to do when it's a stolen vehicle, they approach it with their weapons drawn. So not only before they were handcuffed, they had to look at somebody approaching them from both sides of the vehicle in the rearview mirrors with their hands, with their guns drawn. And so with that, if you're put in a defensive position, you're put in, oh no, we're about to make news now, not for what has happened, but what is about to happen. So when you speak of the other side in terms of trauma, the trauma begins at that point. And you're seeing now, like, what's going on? What do we do? And, now everybody is ushered out of the vehicle, lay face down and handcuff and search. And this is not something that takes place in a matter of minutes. If you've ever been stopped by police officers, they go through, it's a process here of running your place and checking and whatever before they come back. And you can imagine, I don't know how much time expired, but they've been on the ground. You hear if you watch the video, you hear the children screaming and crying. It creates a level of excitement that doesn't go away once the event goes away. And this is a scar that's going to be with them for the rest of their lives, and how things could have changed. And then the excuse that is given by it and the police chief and other issuing an apology, it doesn't, take away from what has happened. So better policing needs to be done, better training. And one of the questions we want to talk about in terms of define the police and what that actually means, we'll address this here, because when you approach a situation from a fear factor and for what could possibly go wrong, they approach it from that standpoint. And that's why when we hear about somebody being shot, it's like, couldn't you shoot them in the leg? No, we have to immobilize, and they shoot for, they shoot to kill, they shoot for the upper torso. And that brings about a lethal or deadly situation. But to get to that point where your weapon is drawn, it should be the last thing that you want to do and not the first thing. But when they see color, that's what happens. There was some type of psychological evaluation that was done in terms of this flashing images and asking questions in terms of black and white and different colors. And more often than not, Black people evoke fear and lawlessness and distrust and all that. So when it's a Black family, a Black person involved, then automatically, without there being insufficient cause or reason, it psychologically triggers something that this right here could be a situation that I need to protect myself in. No matter if it's an 80-year-old woman or a 2-year-old child, they treat it the same. And it's time now that we stop this. And like I said, I'm waiting. I don't wish this on anyone, but I'm waiting for the headline to read a different race or nationality or ethnicity other than us.
I don't know, Pastor Sire, are you going to say something, or I don't know if you raised your hand. I'm sorry. But you're muted. You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, my screen is lagging. I'm sorry. I don't have a dynamic internet connection like most of you all, so forgive me.
No problem. So, I mean, I don't know. We keep maybe asking this same question. We're doing all of these different protests. We're doing all these different things. You have athletes and politicians and movie stars who are speaking out against it. I mean, what do we have to do to fix this police brutality? What do we have to do? I mean, we saw, I believe it was a few weeks ago, a Nevada police sheriff who told a library, listen, I am not going to respond to your 911 calls because you guys support the Black Lives Movement. I mean, what do we have to do to fix this problem with our police? And I guess I want to ask the question now, should we defund the police? I mean, is that the solution to it all? And if we were to defund the police, what does that look like? And I want to ask that question to Elder Tracy.
I want to tell Elder Farrington and folks, first of all, don't wait too long. Don't hold your breath waiting or anything of that nature, because it's just not happening. It's us. We are the threat. We are considered the threat. You said it best. The problem I have with the defunded police, it's just so tough to discuss these things. Some of it is just so idiotic. There are campaign commercials out now by the current administration showing an old lady in her home, and she's in her home and someone's breaking into her home, and she grabs the phone, dials 911, and she's transferred to a building that's vacant and dark, and the phone's ringing, and there's an answering service that comes on and says, if you're calling to report a burglary, rape, murder, and they go down this whole litany of things, we can't answer the phone right now because literally we've been defunded. And they just show mayhem taking place in the streets. And at the end of the commercial, it says, Donald Trump endorses and supports this message. It's sad to play on the emotions of fear, but it's abundantly clear that this is what this country has done for many years. They have seeped in fear of Black people, so that when you see a Black person, you respond to an individual of color, your automatic knee-jerk reaction is to, as you said, immobilize and neutralize the threat, kill them, because you have this innate fear that's been placed there from years and years of systemic racism and white supremacy. Defunding the police does not mean to get rid of the police department. What it simply means is the same way you measure your funds in the suburbs, where you've just asked that all housing be clear cut, no longer having urban or low income housing in certain suburban areas. I'm not sure if we're going to deal with that tonight just based on time. But what they're simply saying is the same way you make sure you have resources available for your children, libraries, you have educational institutions in place that are getting adequate funding. If you look at the funding for certain inner cities, and you look at the funding for certain suburbia, it is extremely different how those funds are allocated towards different resources. And so what they're saying when they say defund the police doesn't mean take away complete funding and get rid of the police department. As we saw in New York, they immediately did it. They actually took some funding out of the police budget and put it into the community to try and have opportunities for young people to grow up and have resources available to them so that they don't fall victim into a certain type of lifestyle. Defunding the police in its most basic, organic state simply means taking those funds. So if you had a budget of, let's say, $1 billion for a certain area, and you were allocating 60% of that towards law enforcement, now you trim that back and allocate maybe 35% or 40% towards law enforcement, and take the remaining 20 to 25% and redistribute that in the community for programming, for schooling, to give at-risk youth a place to go after school, and create those type of things, mental health, things of that nature, as Elder Sy was referring to, as it relates to the issues of trauma and how to deal with that, putting those things in place. But what you do is you strike at fear and you just keep saying, let's make America great again. You're going back to a place where you're saying, you know what, let's make sure that we can go back to where we have this supremacy and this distinction in class, so we can keep certain people separated and keep our foot on individuals' necks that we're going to keep our feet on. And so that is the continual issue with what we see happening with this campaign. You'll see more of it. I've seen 2 commercials where they're pushing this idea of defunding the police and what that looks like. but that is not what the idea is, to completely get rid of the police department. We all know we want to be protected. We want to be served by our police department. We just want to be murdered and traumatized by them in the process. And so, there's a balance there. And I also say this: you talked about how do we combat this? We've done protesting, we've done all these things, but it still keeps happening currently in Aurora. Which is funny about Aurora, some of us may recall, remember the Batman Theater massacre that took place some years ago? Well, that was Aurora, Colorado. I wonder if he ever got pulled over by the police and got, searched, whatever the case may be. But no, that's not the target. But my point for bringing that up is to simply say that if we were to hold police officers accountable immediately for what they do, it's not a matter of having them second guess. It's a matter of having them follow proper procedure and having protocols in place that when you do pull someone over, you think about the implications, opposed to they'll riot for a while, they may protest, they may put a couple bills out there. But at the end of the day, I'll still be insulated by this uniform and this badge, and I can kind of do what I want. And I think that has to be the change as well. There has to be some residual effects, some immediate impact from poor behavior.
All right, Pastor Sy, what's your take on it all? I mean, how do we fix this problem? Should we defund the police? What does that look like? Or is there something else that we can do to fix this problem?
The problem is, what we see it to be, and what continues to be perpetuated through our time, whether it was the time of, in the civil rights time, or, what we see happening within our city limits. And as you said, Elder Tracy, many people get this topic very conflicted, and I believe that there is a difference between disbanding the police and defunding the police. No, I'm not saying put an end to law and order. I believe it helps to keep our society, but law and order as we see it is very oppressive. It's always one-sided. And what we're saying is, by defunding the police, it's just changing that infrastructure of how policing is done, and just reallocating those funds to different departments. Yes, I spoke to trauma. I would love to see a lot more money being flooded into our cities that will help and benefit those that suffer with mental illnesses. Our vets, there are times when, I've gone to Walmart and I've seen veterans who have fought in wars that were created, for political gain. That they're begging for money in the streets. It breaks my heart because these individuals help to fight for many of our freedoms here in America. I know that there are a lot that is done for our vets, but, I believe more can be done, or, affordable housing and health. We see the disparities and the inequities happening within our health systems, between the rich and the poor, those who have access, those who don't. I was reading an article about, farm workers in California. A lot of our agriculture that is grown in America is grown out in California and Texas. And, this is another conversation in and of itself, because it talks about our migrant workers and how they're undocumented and what's happening when it comes to DACA and, all of these different policies. But, we can begin to have some of these conversations if monies aren't just flooded into one area, and we can't even open up the can to have these conversations when these individuals are living below the poverty line, when these individuals can't even have access to adequate health care. Then we have to start asking our questions. Are we really living in an America that is fair for all people? And we know that answer, but, by defunding the police, it opens us up to be more equitable as we live here in this world.
Elder Farrington, what's your take?
Fear and disinformation that has been disseminated to rouse certain bases to think of the defunding the police, meaning to take away police officer off the street, to create a lawless in society. And so that fear mongering has been propagated to individuals to think that way. So I think it's better served with reappropriating funds. Because when you say defunding, it means fomenting that we won't have a police officer or a police station anymore, a police force. and that's not the case. What we have to realize that a significant portion of a city's funds are allocated to police. Los Angeles commits $1.6 billion to funding its police department. New York City, $6 billion for funding its police department. And so when we look at the staggering amount of money, and that outweighs any other entity or the service that a city provides in terms of a vast majority of that is going to policing. And we see this, that there has always been a need in our country to beef up security, so to speak. There's always been need that we have to have the strongest military, and money needs to be there. President Trump, came into office believing that our military is weak and that we need to, they always want to pour money into the military. And the same thing has gone through for policing. And we see now over the years that a lot of surplus items that was militarily intended has now come into the auspices under the care of police departments across the nation in terms of the weaponry that they use, the vehicles. A lot of that stuff is more was meant for military action than for patrolling the citizens of this country. And what has been, and as I've done some research on this, has been one of the biggest obstacles in moving towards this has been police union. Police union wields and yields a lot of force, power, persuasion politically across the nation. It's the reason why police officers aren't committed or charged with crimes. It's the reason certain laws are not put in place or oversight boards or things of that nature, because the police unions, and you even have the mayor, and you can have a police chief wanting to address certain things like in New York, but the police union will stand in direct opposition. And these aren't, we got to understand, a union, they are not where they're elected official politically for a demographic set in place by people. It really is an outside organization that is able to sway influence to an organization that is ran by a municipal organization. And so we have this, the Minneapolis Police Department, or the mayor office, stopped training or sending its police officers for this type of warrior training. And it was like $55,000 per person for them to undergo this type of training. And they were going to reassess and reappropriate funds. The police union started to offer that training for free. And they want to equip this officer with all this guerrilla warfare tactics and things, so that we can have what we see evidence in our streets now. So defund the police officer really is that where we can reappropriate funds. And what has been happening is that the police have been called for a whole litany of concerns. Cat stuck up in a tree, somebody robbing your house, or you got a black man in a park taking pictures, and you got Becky, you got Susan, you got Karen, you got Carol. People, for all manners of things, people are calling the police, and these are social issues. And I was reading here that, police are called to deal with homelessness. And a lot of times these encounters are end in violence or a person being arrested. And so where there are mental health issues and where there are other things where you need a social worker, somebody who clinically trained to deal with and de-escalate a situation, police officers aren't trained for this. And so they're called to these problems, for concerns that citizens are having or someone may report. Just look at Tamir Rice, a young kid in a park playing with a toy gun. The neighbor's like, okay, you're looking at a kid with a gun and you decide to call the police. Go talk to the kid, find his parent, do something. Well, when the police shows up on the scene, a lot of times these things end tragically. And so when we put more money into policing in terms of de-escalation, you say when and how does it end? I don't know how or when, but I know that we can reallocate our resources to different type of social programs and take it away from having a beat patrol always, where individuals are, police officers are responding to these type of calls that are coming through dispatch and 911 that really doesn't, need a police officer. And so they're trying now to train where in certain situations they'll have social workers and other type of entities go out with police officers on these calls, because they can best suit and be able to serve in these situations, other than met with a police with his hand on his weapon, waiting for a reason and an excuse to use it. So I think there need to be more attention given towards it. And I think is when you look at the vast amount of resources that have been appropriated from the city coffers to fund police department, and it's taken away from a lot of social services and programs, I think it's high time that we now look at reappropriating those funds and allowing the city to be able to best take care of its citizen without trying to police them and arrest them and jail them.
Right, good stuff. Good stuff. Let's try to pivot the conversation. Of course, we know the coronavirus is raging strong in the United States, and recently we saw with the MLB, Major League Baseball, specifically the Marlins, I believe 17 of the players tested positive for COVID-19. There are a number of other players on different teams that have tested positive, and they've had to cancel games. The best team in baseball, even though the record doesn't state it, the Boston Red Sox, their pitcher had to, of course, he's sitting out the season because of issues with his heart, because the coronavirus is affecting his heart. And so I guess I want to hear you guys' thoughts on this coronavirus and how it's impacting sports. Should we cancel the sports season? What should this mean? I mean, is it a bad message to our country that we have sports going on and putting these players, a lot of times it's minority players, in harm's way and danger? I want to ask Elder Tracy that, if you could start off.
It's interesting that you actually presented the question the way you did to end, Pastor, because I was watching a game the other day, and as I looked at it, I thought to myself, interesting. When you look at the landscape of the game, those individuals who are up close and personal, who are interacting, I wonder if they really care if they do get infected and have just a life-altering result of it. Here's the short of it. I think it's greater than where we are right now in sports. I think it speaks to where we are as a country. If there are certain measures taken in the beginning of this year, we should not have been having this conversation now as we enter the fall, because we were well on notice before January what was going on. And so have we taken some measures as a country, put some things in place, stop calling it a cold, stop calling it a cough, stop saying that it's not really affecting individuals, stop saying that calling it, using certain type of vernacular to describe what it really is COVID-19, as opposed to trying to put another little name or slur on top of it to try and have some kind of a dig at another country. And when we saw it entering into California, Washington State, and Oregon, taking appropriate measures to safeguard, talking about masks, listening to the health advisors who are coming in, the medical professionals. But instead, we are retweeting individuals who say that they have a cure, don't wear a face mask. And what's most difficult about this whole thing is he actually had how can I say this? Out of all the people who did it, he found a black doctor to come out and say, don't worry about it. And he retweets that individual as the voice of reason. And then we get everything else that comes along with that. And if you watch that press conference that she originally had, she's standing there in front of a group of individuals, medical professionals, all dressed in white coats. None of them look like her, but she's the only one speaking. And she's the only one saying these things. And then all of a sudden her credibility is just shot based upon what we have heard about her after the fact. But having said all that, I think that we are well beyond basketball, baseball, football, and all these other individuals. And what's happening is people who are opting not to go, who are people who are saying, you know what, I'm going to sit the season out. They are being looked at as though you're not a team player. You're not considering the team, the good of the game. You don't love the game. And so I think rather than pitting people against one another that way, we should have just evaluated this thing properly in the beginning of the year, put some measures in place, because what's happening is it's much larger than sports. They're using sports to kind of spearhead what's going to happen in the fall with respect to school. Because now what you do is you say there's nothing really wrong. I don't wear a face mask. You don't need a face mask. You know, most kids can bounce right back from it. If you're healthy, you'll be fine. And it's just not the case. The picture you referred to, he had COVID. He appeared to overcome COVID and subsequently ends up with a heart condition that requires open heart surgery, which requires now he can't come back for the rest of the season. So, and they're saying is the result of what happened to his heart is a result of what his infection of COVID. So this is much larger than sports. What they're doing is they're using that to say, hey, everything's fine, and kind of get us in a zone of normal. And even though people are dropping dead, people are being affected by this and being crippled by it. Let's reopen our schools as well. We saw in Indiana the same kind of a thing. So it's just this mindset to try and get people to be comfortable, kind of let your guard down, that life is back to where it used to be. And it's just not, because the measures that should have been taken were not taken. Now, let me say this. I want to make sure I'm very clear. I'm not suggesting for a moment that we could have stopped this from happening in the beginning of the year, that there wouldn't have been any more infections and we would have been well on our way now and been in the clear. But what I am saying is, having done nothing up until around March, we lost time. And those 3 months where we lost time, we allowed the virus to get stronger and stronger here in the continental United States. And so I just think that there would have been a more serious approach, a more aggressive approach. We are just now getting certain mask mandates passed throughout the country, where individuals have to wear masks. And it's kind of like, okay, we're in August. We're getting ready to wrap it. We're in the second half of the year. We're getting to wrap this year up in a few months. And as we approach election time, as we approach an election cycle, that's when these things are starting to roll out bit by bit. And I'll say this and take it for what it's worth. There are certain individuals who are now wearing a mask or sporting a mask, I'll say, that if their name wasn't hitting a ballot, I'm not too sure if they'd be sporting that mask. There are certain individuals who are trying to host certain type of campaign events, and they're simply saying, no, everyone can still gather. We're fine. Everyone can still gather in those certain arenas or those certain venues. I'll just go ahead and I'll appear through a cameo appearance from the Oval Office. Oh, really? You're not going to go? Because Herman went. I'm done.
Pastor Sy, what is your take on it? Seeing all of these Major League Baseball players contract COVID, and even NFL players. What does this mean for our country? What does this mean for sports?
It's, I don't know, like, when we look at it, you have to look at it from two different points of view. The first one I look at it is from the NBA. You have to ask yourself, is the National Basketball Association the blueprint? Because they're boasting with 343 players, and numerous of support staff and coaches, obviously, that they have had a zero test, since the inception of this bubble has started. And, it's funny to hear Greg Popovich talk, because he always, speaks with a lot of cleverness, and, he always is very witty when he speaks, but it's always truthful. And he talks about, how, the United States, we couldn't get it right as a country. But, looking at the NBA, look what we did. And so it goes to your point, Elder Tracy, we had ample amount of time when we saw this taken off in Wuhan, when we saw South Korea and many other countries, going on lockdown. South Korea was praised. They were, applauded for taking such drastic measures, and being very expeditious with implementing certain policies to ensure that their citizens took it serious. And for us to not do that, it's just very disheartening. So I go back to, is it necessary for us to have sports? For me, it's like, it is what it is. People, they know what they're signing up for. There's some that are taking a stance and saying, hey, I'm just going to opt out. I'm not going to put my family, my myself at risk because of, just entertainment purposes. But then on the other side of that, the NBA lets us know that it can be done. If you follow these protocols, if you have these measures in place, we don't have to have a team full of 17 people that has to shut down their club because they have tested positive. But, it was basically a zero tolerance. Lou Williams went to, get some chicken wings at a disclosed place that is across the internet. But look what they did to him. He had to go and to get quarantined because they were using that to set the precedence. You just can't go and do as you please and come back and, possibly infect and ruin what we have fought so hard for since the closing of our season. So if he has to deal with those repercussions at his level, then, I look to MLB, I look to the NFL. It's not enough to have a tunnel filled with sanitizer. Sanitizer is just not the only thing that combats this. They're telling us to have soap and water, social distancing, so on and so forth, because I don't know, thinking about myself, I don't know where the next person has been when they leave practice. I don't know where the next person has come from when they're coming to practice. So it's like having those questions within my mind. It's like, it's not safe. And, I just, I wouldn't be the one to be out there on the field. So that's just me. I don't even go to the gym for that very fact. They're like, oh, come back, Lindsay. But I'm like, that's a negative because, if somebody coughs on me, then what do I do? What does the good pastor do, right?
All right. So, Elder Tracy.
Just to that point, two things. The first thing I'll say is, on a very serious note, the hand sanitizer, we've seen some recalls. People getting blind. It's like one of them could cause blindness just from being applied, and another one would actually cause death by being ingested. And people typically use hand sanitizer, then eat something, and you're ingesting whatever's in the hand sanitizer, and it can cause death. They have to end up doing a recall on that. So it's kind of like you don't know where to go. As you said, the hand sanitizer sometimes can't be enough. And the second thing is, if we can continue to push our health message past the side, maybe that one certain player wouldn't go out for chicken wings.
Oh boy! So let me ask the question to you, Elder Farrington. Let's switch questions. So, how do we combat COVID-19? Of course, it's raging strong in the country. A lot of hospitals are to capacity. There are politicians who are pushing for us to open schools, and there's some schools that are actually opening up. But how do we curtail this number, this spike in cases? I heard I heard one doctor in Houston said that there are a lot of deaths in the U.S. and there's a problem. There are two issues that we face. We face COVID-19, and then we face stupidity. That's why there's a lot of deaths. And so, but how do we fix this? Should we shut down the country? Should we mandate everyone wear masks? How do we deal with COVID-19? Because hundreds of thousands of more people will die. Already over 100,000, 150, 160,000 have died from this virus. How do we stop it? What's your opinion on that, Elder Farrington?
Give me the loaded question. What happened to Jason? Here's my thing. I don't think there's a one size fits all policy outside of just shutting it down. That's just, mandating people that, because you're having a hard time getting people to wear masks. And I can tell you now, there'll be a social upheaval if you ask individuals to shelter in place and be on lockdown again. You saw how people marched the Capitol in Michigan armed up, feeling that their rights were restricted and their civil liberties was taken away. And I can assure you that that environment will come back. And so you are now expend resources, police albeit, to combat that and try to enforce those measures, which could bring about a level of violence from individuals. But when you look at opening schools and offering certain services, whether it's in person or from a distance, It's just a unique dynamic. I'm all for, in favor of staying at home. I do know that there are things that I go to the store, I go get stuff. So that means somebody has to be there working for me and providing those things. So their lives are at jeopardy. It's just for a service for me. So it's not as easily addressed when you look at all the moving parts. Now, there are certain things that we have done, and look at South Korea. Pastor Sai had mentioned earlier, taking the drastic measures to shut everything down. But you look at a country like Switzerland, I think they never did, and they were able to keep their rates down. But we're a much larger country. We've got a lot of moving parts, a lot of things going on, and then we have, these rights that people want to hold up, the First Amendment right. They don't think about, but they think about that Second Amendment right, the right to bear arms, and they want to do that. It's unique and challenging when you're talking about sending kids to school and allowing and hoping that the school can figure out, because the president wants for that to happen, but he said they'll figure it out. So he said, hey, do it. I don't have no answers on how you're going to do it. I can't provide a blueprint or a map or any guidance. But follow the CDC guidelines or the state, and then he goes to the CDC and say, hey, your guidelines are too stringent. Can you relax some of these requirements and rules and things of that nature, so that schools can open up or people feel more confident in sending their children to school. But I don't get how people will look at children learning from home as being deconstructive or being imperious to their health because they're not in a natural environment for learning. And when I juxtapose that against what could happen when one contract COVID, how that really, talk about a person needing open heart surgery or certain other things, health things, and then ultimately death. But my child learning from home would now may have some developmental issues from learning from home. Whereas if he went to school, he can learn, freely and engage with other students, but yet he can come back home with a deadly disease and give it to me. And so people are arguing for that, that environment to take place. So the best thing to do is for it to go. If we were to have done it effectively in the beginning, then we could have had a low transmission rate in terms of shutting down the country. But since this was a hoax, the Chinese flu and everything else that it's been called, it's going to magically go away. It's summertime, when it gets hotter. Has it gone away yet? No. So all these things that are from leadership that we were told, or would happen, or this right here just temporarily. Had we had taken better precautions then we could have been in a much better situation now. But since we didn't, and they are very reluctant to say close down again, so that's off the table. I can tell you that that's off the table. It's best now to say that there's going to be casualties of war as we race for a cure, and that's the model that they're going by.
And so the coronavirus is a serious thing. It's more than just coughing. It's more than just a fever. Of course, we just stated this pitcher for Boston Red Sox having heart issues, and I just watched something on the news, I believe it was last week. A nurse, he contracted it, and he started to have paralysis from COVID-19. There are individuals who have who contract it, they get over it, but then still have memory issues. And so it's so much more than just deeper than just breathing. And so this is something that we have to attack. And I'm throwing this out to you, Elder Tracy. How do we deal with this? Should we shut down? What should we do to try to deal with it? I mean, we look at what happened in New York. Their numbers have drastically went down. What should we do in the state of Florida and just in our country?
Well, nothing is going to happen. What should we do? We should actually care about human life. But nothing is going to happen, because what this has turned into is a political debate, and they're drawing lines in the sand regarding political base. When you have senators and lawmakers who are saying they will not reach an agreement on a stimulus package because they think people should just go back to work, listen to the messaging that they're saying. We'll give you $200 to live off of. In other words, you can't live off of that. Go back to work. Well, I can't go back to work. It's not safe. Well, we just believe they're living better now than you ever were before. So you have one set of individuals, lawmakers, who are saying that they're not going to give any more money through a stimulus package because they don't believe individuals actually who can work will work. It's a pandemic. We're not talking about a place where I don't want to work at Burger King. I'm going to wait for my dream job at Sears. It's a pandemic. Like, people are dying because of a pandemic. There are certain jobs, if you get, you're literally just putting yourself on a timeline as it relates to how much time before you actually are exposed to it. So this has turned into a political debate. It has turned into a place where lawmakers are hedging their bet with this certain administration. Not even political base relates to political party or affiliations relates to Democrat versus Republican. It's turned into an administration. Are you going to go ahead and side with this administration? And just to be perfectly honest with you, in this state, in Florida, our governor got up and said that he will send his children back to school. I don't know what school his children go to, but I know one child was in a commercial years ago building a wall with Legos because they were building the wall back in the administration's idea that we need to build a wall to keep certain individuals out of our country. And it's funny that every country now is building a wall to keep us out of it because we have the largest numbers in Corona. But nonetheless, we are in a place where unless we're honest about what's going on around us and stop making it seem as though we have a 15-day plan, and in that 15-day period, we'll be able to get these numbers to level out and we can be on the other side of this coronavirus. And as Elder Farrington pointed out, it's summertime, the heat will cause the virus to just die out in a few days. Okay, well, this is August and it's Florida. And what's interesting is Florida, Texas, Arizona, some of the hottest states you'll find this time of year are spiking. So go ahead with that medical degree you picked up on your way from the Capitol Hill to the White House and explain to me exactly how we've arrived where we are. You'd have to shut down, but you already told individuals in Michigan when they shut down, they marched on the state's capital. You told those individuals to liberate yourselves. In other words, insurrect and start a war. That's what came out of the White House when that happened in Michigan. So what you've just done is you've told individuals all around the country, if they attempt to lock you down, revolt. What's he really getting ready for? And I'll just call it what it is. November 4th, when election time rolls around, he's already laying the groundwork. It's going to be one of the most outrageous, one of the most, what was the word he used? Pretty much it's going to be one of the most fraudulent elections ever. In other words, he's going to beat what he did in 2016, right? But it's going to be one of the most fraudulent elections ever. And the results, you can't rely on them. He's getting the base aligned. So when the results do come out and it doesn't go in his favor, revolt. That's the same messaging that's happening now with respect to they try to shut you down. They try to cause a mandate to go forward where you have to be, shut down in place again, push back and revolt. If you look at the conversation that was happening between the White House and New York in the very early stages, and the governor in New York, at first, he was a good friend. All of a sudden, he became what? Arch enemy number one. When the lockdown started going beyond what it was the time period. And also, he was saying, we're not getting supplies from the White House. This country is in a strange place when all we care about is our votes as opposed to human life. In Florida, and I'll say this last piece and I'll be done. We're reporting our deaths and our infection rates to the CDC, right? And the CDC, they were the ones who were actually releasing those numbers. So as we're seeing those numbers just climb, they're just astronomical. All of a sudden, the federal government says, don't report. Hospitals do not report these numbers anymore to the CDC. Report these numbers to Health and Human Services. Why is the federal government telling the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, to not control the numbers that are coming out regarding this disease, but have it actually reported to a federal agency? Well, because if we see the numbers go up, what ends up happening? What do? We lock down and try and protect ourselves. But if you tell us the numbers are not going up, we end up exposing ourselves even more. And if you look at who's being affected by this more than anybody else, it's us. it's us. And we just have to be very careful, be very vigilant. So if they won't lock us down, I think we need to take some steps on our own to safeguard and protect ourselves. Face masks, they're not 100%, but it's better than not wearing a face mask. Sanitizing is not as good as washing your hands with soap and warm water for 20 seconds or more. But if you have nothing else, do that. Have a problem touching your face now. Just, even if you're home, just try to avoid touching your face because it can cause some issues when you go out and you're in public. So just those type of things, just having to implement your own life, because unfortunately our country is more concerned with what happens in the ballot box as opposed to what happens with the lives of those individuals as opposed to who we actually represent.
Pastor Sy, what's your take? What should we do as a country to try to lower the numbers?
All I can do is just speak for myself, just do our part individually. Obviously we've had good arguments on how our country is taking, action or inaction against, the spread of coronavirus. But if we all do our respective parts and we are, in charge of what happens within our households and just being that best practice, there are people that have to go to work, sadly, medical professionals and those that are deemed, to work because they are critical to our society. And it's hard for us to, just completely shut down, because then who will the nurses take care of? But the nurses don't have to be overwhelmed in the ERs and the urgent cares. If people stop having parties and, you stop going to the bars and, we don't go to bars, but, going to the restaurants and different places, like Ross and Marshall's, there shouldn't be a line wrapped around the building. Where are we going? There's no school that is opening up physically in August. We're doing things virtually till further notice. If anything, just tops, right? But the reality is, people, we are a society that are very selfish. We're very entitled. And I don't say this generally, but the reality is when people see Americans, there's this, this wealth mindset or, just this entitlement. And if we all do our part, then, I believe that we can help to stop the spread and to, I don't think it's going away all of a sudden, we all just stay in the house, it goes away. I think we'll see it for a while because someone says, how do we do away with it? But I just believe that we just have to honestly let those who are, doing the, getting all the vaccines in place and so on and so forth, do their best, to hopefully get us to a place where we can get back into society and it can be, we can be back not to normal, but be better than normal.
Appreciate that. Let's take another turn. And it's very interesting. I don't know if it was last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. We haven't actually had an opportunity to talk about this, but Jenna Ellis, the campaign advisor to Trump, she said something very interesting. She basically said the separation of church and state is a liberal lie. The separation of church and state is a liberal lie. And hearing this person who is, of course, advising the president of the country, what's your opinion of that when you hear that? And I want to ask Elder Farrington, what's your take on that?
You said somebody associated with Trump.
Advisor.
Now I heard what you said. I'm just being facetious here. Yeah. So. She's in his camp. Okay, then. Right. That says it all. That says it all. They would deny somebody gone to the moon if it suited them, So normally you have when people try to rewrite history once history has been written. Now we have people who are doing it in real time and trying to denounce certain entities or certain norms or establishment of truths or what have you, or water it down, and then they try to pin it on a social group or a political organization when they say liberal and things of that nature of Black Lives Matter. So when I look at people that have lost their way because of this president, and he can only be in office for the max of 8 years, but we know prayerfully, I'm praying that it's only 4, and it's like, where do you go from here? When he's gone, it's like for this short little blip, on this political spectrum timeline, you're willing to compromise all that you thought you were for, family values and law and order and things of that nature in terms of civility and caring for human lives and all that stuff. And where people will go against sound medical advice, and Dr. Fauci, the head of the Center for Disease, Infectious Disease, is under attack because he doesn't agree with the president. Had this been another president, say the last one, then they've been looking for a cause, reason, or excuse for him not to go with the experts. And now the experts, people who have years of practice and in service and been on the front line, and now are questioned more to their specification in terms of the area of medicine that they practice, more so than someone who's just get up and rambles, and goes off the seat of his pants. So yeah, I have a problem when individuals that have, for political reason, and don't want to be castigated by others in the camp. And so they found it that they have to go more further out on a limb and go further in terms of how they address and state something, because they know they have the backing and support of the president, and others won't go against him that are a part of that same political persuasion. And so it's very interesting to hear this. It has no merits. It doesn't stand on its own. We know when we look at the separation of church and state and what it really is supposed to mean, and we know from a prophetic standpoint that there will find a self-merging. So this right here is laying the platform and the ground for it, and what we believe as Adventists in terms of how laws are passed in regards to worship. But the Constitution and our foundation of our government has been meant that there has been a division between that, so that when we look at, there should be no respect of religion in terms of one versus the other. But yeah, so when we look down the road and we look from where we are now, we can see how this right here is just greasing the runway, so to speak, for what's to come, where people who will be more outrageous than this person that would run and harp on that, and then try to enact certain laws, put things in place that will usher in the second coming of Christ. So I'll just say this here: anything that comes from people in Trump camp, unless I can look outside and see it raining, I won't believe it's raining if they say it.
All right, Elder Tracy, what is your stance on Jenna Ellis? I think that's a very scary statement that she stated, but what's your stance?
I think that one of the things you have to kind of evaluate, who she is and her relationship to Trump. She's an attorney who is the legal advisor for the Trump campaign. And she has written some books, and her books are highly aligned with the mindset of individuals who believe in this very conservative outlook on not only the way governance, but they look at it as governance being backed by scripture. And so what she's challenging is a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote, and explaining that there are 3 tiers of government. And so she believes that there is no separation. He was not separating church from state, but he was merely simply saying that there are 3 ways in which government ought to function. I'll say this. Trying to pin it on the liberal America. We discussed this a few weeks back, and I don't remember how long it's been. It has been some time since we've had a discussion. But the gentleman who was being attacked was it Indiana? The black gentleman who was being attacked by some individuals, and he had some white friends with him that would not leave. They kept trying to get the white friends to leave the black man alone so they could go ahead and do what they wanted to do with him. And they threatened to lynch him and some other things. What they kept saying, they never called him out of his name. They never called him black anything. They never called him the words that you and I have all been too acquainted with, that type of hate speech. You know what they kept saying to him? You liberal, you liberal, you liberal. But the venom that accompanied the word liberal, you knew exactly what they were saying to him. So you hear statements like this from people like Ellis, and she's saying that that's a lie created by the liberals. She knows what she's stirring within the base. And the idea is, let's make America great. Don't allow the liberals to strip what we've already begun to make. Let's get back and make our country great again. And if we allow the liberals to do this, there'll be tyranny everywhere. So what they're really getting at is, it's not an issue of Republican, Democrat, because if that's the case, why don't they say you Democrat? But they use this word liberal, and it is the modern day communism term that was being used back in the Cold War era and sometime beyond, before. So what we're looking at here with this idea that the separation of church and state, I can guarantee you it will usher in the Sunday blue law, things of that nature, that type of mindset. This is what we've been planning for. This is what we've been waiting for. I think the problem the Seventh-day Adventist Church is going to have in these last days is considering the vehicle being used to drive in and usher in these last day events that we've been preparing for since 1853. What do I mean? We have a top that continues to say that the last day events, and again, this is coming from Kenny Shelton, the last day of the final Christ, the last day events, signs of the time, are the people of color in the streets protesting. So what's happening is there's this mindset that the blacks are the problems, that the blacks are the problem. I mean, they stop just writing and go and being anarchists. We can just all get along and move our country forward. The problem, however, is that is what's being used to perpetuate the agenda of stronger police power, militarize our police. And once we can militarize our police and get them where they need to be, we can strip away more rights. And then we can actually go in and start saying, you know what, we need prayer. We need to start pushing forward and having more church. We need. And what happened? We saw the picture with the upside down Bible, right? We saw the picture of the upside down Bible, and then we saw we need to have a day of prayer. So open the churches up so we can have a day of prayer. And so what ends up happening? We have people like, can I just call the name since it's just accurate with it? So we have people like Doug Batchelor who go on Twitter and they begin to post, or on social media, they begin to post pictures of an airplane cabin packed with individuals and calling on their governor and saying, hey, governor, why is it that you're saying the churches have to remain closed, but an airplane, they can still carry passengers wherever? I guess that's not an essential, that's an essential business. So without realizing it, you're starting to wage this war with this idea of conservative versus liberal, but you're siding with individuals who have a certain mindset where it's the supremacy and oppression that gets them where they need to be. It's that separation of classes. And when you keep pushing that agenda forward and you believe anyone who opposes that is a liberal, you begin to make the argument political, and you can usher in religious or spiritual agendas by using a political means or vehicle to do it, or a civil unrest to do it. And you end up achieving the end of this idea of this separation of church and state, having it blend and merge into one and becoming this religio-political body. And so I think that is one I could never figure out as a child. How are they going to be able to do this? I mean, we're going to see it coming a mile away, but this is it. Like, this is literally it. This civil unrest, this idea where no one can, there is no gray area. There's nowhere for you to stand anymore and say, I don't have a position on the matter. Everyone has a thought on this. Like, everyone has to say something about whether they believe that a black life matters or a black life doesn't matter, or they believe more in the flag than they do in human blood. And so, like, there becomes these issues that come up and people have to have these discussions. And so now we're at that place, we're at the crossroads, and it's unfortunate, but many within our own organization have taken a serious position against caring about life being snuffed out. Because I found it very, very peculiar that I haven't heard a mumbling word from the individuals whose names I just named a few moments ago concerning black people dying, people of color dying, a woman in Aurora being dragged out of her vehicle and handcuffed with her 6-year-old children, and just children all on the street face down. Not one mumbling word, but you had time to get a picture of a cabin of an airplane and talk about opening up your church doors again. When if you're really concerned, you hit the streets and say, you know what, someone needs to hear the word of Jesus. Let me go to the police department and speak to them about who Jesus really is and how much he loves them and loves everyone of color. And let's try to push this idea of being one group of a human race. And it's just missing, and it's missing, and it's missing. So Jenna Ellis, she said it. There are many who believe it. And she's actually starting to usher in that mindset of, you know what, we do need to get our country back where we do have, one nation under God, and we start pushing this idea forward. So I think that while she's off the rails in many respects in the books that she's written, she's very much on target with what she's always said. She has not deviated from her from what she has believed. And so Trump is grabbing individuals who will help him grab that base on the push forward through November.
Preacher, what's your take? Jenna Ellis comments that that's dangerous words. That separation of church and state is a liberal lie.
Yeah. I didn't really catch wind of what she said, although I did read some articles about it. But all I can think about coming and putting on my my ministry hat is, we're nearing home. Those are words that, as a believer, reading Matthew 24, the books of Daniel, Revelation, and, the writings of Ellen White, these are words that should be preparing us to get our hearts, get our homes, get everything in order, because we know that the coming of Christ, is draweth nigh. So, when I hear those words, it's just one of those sounding alarms, those sounding bells to say, get ready, get ready, get ready. Just because we know that when they start speaking that rhetoric, they are passing laws right now while we are sleeping, literally while we are sleeping. I was doing a project a couple weeks ago, 2 separate projects. One project that was on culture, and basically just understanding the laws of, what's happening in our society here in South Florida as it relates to sanctuary cities. I don't know if you all recall, but, Miami and South Florida, we were sanctuary cities, but over the course of time, sometime in 2020, we no longer have that status. And it's so saddening because there are many people that are undocumented that live within our community. If you check out the Netflix series, it's on immigration. It's so disheartening to see the work of ICE. I know that these are people just doing their jobs, but for people to say, to go and arrest and apprehend one person for living here undocumented, and then to call everyone else living in that house collaterals. All I can think about is saying, man, if they can take collaterals to jail just because they are undocumented and they're associated with this one person, just imagine when that Sunday blue law is enacted, who's going to tell on you? Are we collaterals that are going to be sent or taken somewhere? And then I saw another, another documentary, and this is very much more controversial than the first one. And I was just there to say it just because it's on the books within our state. And it was on abortion, and there's a lot of, back and forth across the aisle as it relates to, how women, should care for their body and what they do, the choice that they have. But I'll say this, that as of July 1, young people who were deciding to, make that choice, they had to talk with their parents, get something notarized, and to bring in a driver's license, because I was doing a project on, these rights. Right. So when I think about all of these laws, and that's the biggest point that I'm trying to make here, is that these are laws. Some of these laws have been on the books, for decades, for decades. And then over the course of time, sometimes you don't see it in a headline. They don't report on these things. These aren't things that hit the fan and go to CNN directly. It's not until a person like myself is doing a research project to learn, oh, wow, I didn't know we weren't sanctuary cities, or, oh, wow, I didn't know that they just put stricter laws on the books for those, wanting to make that choice for abortion. So all I'm saying is that, we're nearing home, and, it's going to be like one of those situations like, oh, wow. So they really are going to take, church and state and, Sunday blue laws and take it to the next level and enact them. And hopefully it's not too late. Hopefully we continuously get our houses in order. But it's just a reminder that Jesus is definitely coming soon. And those are words that, that can bring some of us hope in these difficult times, that, his reward is coming quickly.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting the times that we're living in. And President Trump, because of COVID-19, he is basically saying that we should possibly delay this election. And I mean, what's your take on that? Should we delay this election? And if, of course, the election is still set for November, how should we handle it? Should we mail in our ballots? Should we early vote? What should we do? What is your take on the matter, Elder Farrington?
The election shouldn't be delayed. It's only something that he's saying because he's trying to buy more time in office and hoping that if he can dissuade many, or in some matter persuade many to think in that regard, that is better suited until we can work at all the kinks and have every vote effectively counted, that he should be able to remain in office until that is decided. You understand that mail-in votes and early voting was never a problem until we started effectively using that. Because if you go back to when we got our rights to vote, that they would have roadblocks. They would have police officers harassing people going to the poll. When we got a mail-in ballot, you can't figure out when somebody's going to mail that. So you can't stop, you can't suppress that vote. You just have to try to find a way not to count it. So when they have irregularities at polling places, when machines aren't working or they only have a certain number, but when you can fill out a ballot and send it by the mail, then it eliminates that strategy. So he wants to delay. I don't see a need to. If Amazon can get you something in COVID in 2 days, Amazon Prime, then there's a way for we can mail in a ballot and get it to an election supervisor so that can be accounted in that regard. So I just have a problem, or I'm not surprised by it. Trump is basically want to do anything to stay in power. He likes control. He likes the attention. He wants to be the one that people have to answer to. He's a narcissist. We all know that. And he would do anything. And that's why he's playing to his base. He would do anything to stay in power. And any results that comes back showing him not winning in any particular area, that they're going to cry foul. It's just the way it is. He can't rely on Russia in this right here. And I'm sure they probably trying to do something for him. Hey, Russia, are you listening? So he's a person that is going to be all out to stay in power. And I think we have to be ever vigilant to ensure, because you understand that there are ways that they can still try to steal this election, even though that the polls show him behind it double digits in a lot of key battleground states. And that you got to understand that these folks that believe in him that strong will try to do something to keep him there. And the thing I would say it, and I pray that I'm wrong, is that the aftermath of the election, I will worry about security, because I think some folks will see that as a day of reckoning, because they know that what's coming is going to repeal and roll back and all those things that he has, the things that Obama passed and put into place that we would have had an infectious team at the White House. We would have had so many things that could have combated this. All these safeguards that were taken away, and then things that were defunded in terms of the CDC and the EPA and all these other organizations, that will come back. And you look at that, there are going to be probably some sensible gun control measures as passed when you get both bodies of Congress that could be in Democratic control to pass those measures. So there's going to be, in my estimation, I pray I'm wrong, there's going to be some level of pushback, and how that will play out, I couldn't say, but I wouldn't be surprised when those things happen. And I'm praying that he's out of office. It was a nightmare to begin with, and I'm waiting for this dream to be over with. And so, but the sad reality is that the Bible doesn't speak of things getting better. It simply doesn't. And we're hoping for a better day, but for Christ to come back, things have to be at its worst. You know, Martin Luther King once said that it's not until it's dark enough can you see the stars. And we realize spiritually that the Bible said there's going to be wars and rumors of wars. There's going to be pestilence and earthquakes. And all. It doesn't speak of things getting better. Things will happen in pockets, but society has gone to hell in a handbasket, so to speak, when we look at where we've come in terms of what we see socially, what is accepted as behavior, and a lot of other factions, that this right here is ushering in the end of time. And it's sad to say that we find that these things are going to get worse. There's going to be stripping of civil liberties, so it can pave the way for things that's going to take place. Elder Tracy, you mentioned before, in regards to ICE and how they operate, you see that people were, I think I may be other Lindsley, in regards to when children, for immigration standpoint, was taken and put in cages. And I can see us as Seventh-day Adventists in the same place, you know, being held for days and weeks and months on end, not because we can't determine our citizen status. It's because that they need place to housing, and, you know, and things going to happen. And so we've been warned. We just have to be prepared for it. We can see things now that are paving the way for that to happen, because who would have thought that not being able to, or being told to wear a mask, or stay at home, so a deadly virus could possibly plateau and stop society will cause people to say, let me strap up and go and march on the Capitol with my gun. I mean, it's not that egregious. It's not that egregious. But when you look at something where people defend the day of worship like that, it seems so far-fetched. But a mask, stay at home so you can live. And people were like, I have the right to do X, Y, Z. And it's saddening, but we can see if they go to that length, then it's no stretch of the imagination where it can go from here. So I'm not surprised that Trump will want to say that in terms of extending the election, because it's not going in his favor. Other than that, he will say, hey, let's certify the results. We already know that everybody wants me to be president. Let's certify the results and let's move this country forward. We have a lot of things to accomplish. Here's our agenda for the next 4 years. And he can speak as a commander in chief of somebody that, believe that he has a platform to run on and that he can got some more unfinished business. But when you look at the fact that it's shaky, he doesn't have a 4-year plan right now because he don't see himself winning. But, he thinks of himself winning, but the numbers doesn't show that. And I pray that it holds true.
All right, Elder Tracy, what is your take with this election? President Trump is saying to push it back. Should we push it back? And if the date stays the same, how should we handle voting? Should we mail in the ballots? Should we believe our president that it's not going to be valid? What should we do? Early vote? Should we stand in line? What should we do?
Well, it seems as though there has been some communication from the Kremlin that the best course of action is to push the election back. That's the only reason he's going to push it back, based upon the help he received last time. We literally have, and this is strange to me, very, very strange, how you look at a group of individuals and call them subhuman. You equate them to animals or even lower than animals. But yet you have an individual you call commander-in-chief who does not understand the Constitution or the powers that they actually possess, or don't possess for that matter. And to start calling for an election to be extended, as people have said, we've had wartime in this country's history. and election dates stand true. Like you don't push them back no matter what the crisis is. And the best you have is, I don't know if the absentee or the mail-in ballots are going to be accurately counted. Well, then we know that's not true. We know that's true because in West Virginia, someone just pled guilty to voter fraud. Postal worker who went in and took a black pen and changed party affiliation from individuals from Democrat to Republican. Just so happened the clerk, when they saw the ballots, realized, I know these people and I know their party affiliation. And that's how the individual was caught. So will there continue to be fraud? Definitely. The Farrington point spot on. We also have a suppression issue as well, because even though we all voted last year and the overwhelming result in Florida was to restore felon rights, voting rights, what did they do? They found that little fine print. Oh, well, they have to make sure they pay back all the costs and make sure the costs are all satisfied for their the case that they had. Well, they don't have money to pay those costs back, so they took it up on appeal. And what happened? They've lost. And that result came out a few weeks back. So now it's gotten kicked back, where they're going to have to go back and try to go back before the lower court because they got kicked back from the higher court. And now we're looking at that won't be resolved before November 4th. And they know that, and they're fine with that. The idea is they won't have those votes. That's about 1 million votes that just won't be counted. So there's all type of things that are in place while the approval ratings are in the toilet. And while individuals are just frustrated with what's going on, I can assure you there are plans in place. And I heard a former senator, say it best. He said, in order for Biden to win, he would have to win big because they're going to cheat, lie, and steal all the way to the to election day and beyond. So I'm not telling anyone who to vote for. And I'll just stop here. I'm not telling anyone who to vote for. I'm not telling you to vote for one party versus the other. We could sit here all day and break down and tear down each candidate, whether it be local or national. But what I will say is this. You spoke about a sheriff from Nevada who told the library, don't call us anymore. We're not going to respond to your calls. In Florida, that's an elected position. I want to be clear about this. On August 18th, you who are listening, who are residents here in Florida or individuals who can vote, that's your decision who your sheriff is. We have recently seen a movie adaptation of an individual's life who actually, Just Mercy, where the sheriff in Alabama was known for fraudulent criminal conduct. He was reelected over and over again, served out 30 years and literally just retired, not resigned, not fired, retired last year. And the reason I'm saying that is because if we don't do enough in our local elections, you can't just show up on game night on the championship and all of a sudden it's going to come together. You have to do enough locally and have that thing just bleed out. So whatever your decisions are, just do some research. Take a look at your ballot and just Google the names. Take a look and see who these individuals are. Take a look and figure out whether the supervisor of elections has always been a Democrat. Because right now, her name is on signs everywhere in Palm Beach County that she's a Democrat. But she was appointed by DeSantis as a Republican and then went back recently and asked for his blessings to change her party affiliation to Democrat because she recognizes in Palm Beach County, in order to get elected, again, as a supervisor of elections, she would have to have that party affiliation. So all I'm simply saying is we have to do the research. We have to recognize what we're dealing with here. And don't just think that I can vote down the ticket on a party lines and figure that, oh, I'm fine as long as I'm voting for Democrat. Figure out how long they've been there. Figure out what they've done since they've been there. We've had a lot of school shootings. We've had a lot of issues on gun rights, had a lot of issues on stand your ground. We've seen Trayvon Martin. So you can't keep yelling in one hand Trayvon Martin, but not recognizing lawmakers who have said, you know what, they don't really have a problem with stand your ground because those are the very things that cause a young man to lose his life. Do the research, know what's going on. The last thing I'll say is, Sunday Blue Law is ready. It's ripe. There's nothing else to be done. There's no need for another law to be passed or for anything. It's ripe. And right now, the civil unrest and with the pandemic, all it takes is for Trump to say, you know what? I've spoken to some world leaders and some religious leaders, and we think it's a good idea for us to start praying here and it starts shutting down the country and it's having a real focus, but we need everyone on board. We don't need any heretics. We don't need anyone who's going to go contrary to this mindset. And once that's done, it's done. And I say Trump, it could be anyone who does that. And then all of a sudden we want to say, oh, Lord, this is what you spoke about. It's coming. It's here. We're in the midst of it. So again, I just implore everyone to look at your ballot before you mail it in, drop it off, whatever the case may be, and do some research on these candidates. They put out these commercials. They campaign in your neighborhoods, but you've never seen them before, and you'll never see them again after Election Day. And that's the sad part of it. For many of them, not all of them, but many of them.
All right. Thank you for that. I think that we've had a great discussion, and all good things must come to an end. But we're going to ask Pastor Sy if you could just give us the closing thoughts, maybe even your opinion on what we were just talking about, and then give us our closing prayer.
And like many of us said tonight, these conversations can go on and on and on. But we definitely want you all to continue to stay tuned for more relevant conversations. I believe that, the voices that spoke tonight were really, really well. And I echo them. In these latter days, we have to do our part civically, locally, so that we can ultimately see change from the bottom up. And we pray that, as the elections roll around, that, God impresses upon our heart to, stand in the gap for some people that can see some differences in their life, their quality of life, as we put the right people in place to make the right decisions. So at this time, I want to close us off with a word of prayer. Our Father and our God, we just want to say thank you so much for allowing us, to close this beautiful Sabbath day. We thank you for just a powerful message preached by our Pastor Newton earlier, God, that reminds us of the three angels message and how we need to continue to be overcomers. And Lord, just the many conversations and fellowship that we've had today. And I pray that as we open up this new week, God, that you bless us, bless our families, bless our homes, bless our health, God. I pray you bless, Lord, our local leaders and even our faith leaders, God, that we will continue to fight the good faith. And I pray, Lord, that as we depart never from your presence, that we'll see you in a new way. We thank you. We love you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. God bless you all. God bless you all. See you next week.